All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Wendy with San Diego County Gun Owners, and I'm here today with Desi, who is also from San Diego County Gun Owners.
Hi.
Um, we did a really cool interview about 2 months ago on Gun Owners Radio with Jeff Johnsgaard. And as you all know, radio is very limited on time. We have very tight restrictions on how long each segment is. And there was just so much really good information that we wanted to invite Jeff back and get some more info out of him. So welcome, Jeff. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you, Wendy, Desiree. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So Jeff, why don't you tell us again what your background is and how you got into teaching and all that fun stuff.
Okay, well, I guess the brief version is simply that I'm a Canadian police officer, so I'm in my 18th year. And just due to those restrictions, I'll just leave it at that for the name. And I'm coming to you from Canada at this very moment.
Awesome. So you trained or stalked the founder of Center Axis Relock, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess that that word is quite loaded, stalked, but I know you stole it because I say that. I stole it from another mentor of mine named Ken Murray. He says he just collects super interesting people and stalks them until they become his friends. And I know that's what you're cueing on there. So yeah, one of those people was a unique individual named Paul Castle, who I did run across some years ago. And he had this compressed shooting system, and it worked really well for, inside of a vehicle and some other things. And he was a unique snowflake. He was a unique individual, to say the least. And met him at an interesting time in my life. And given that he was one of the people I guess I was learning from. So he certainly was good at passing a message, although you kind of loved him or hated him. It was one side of that coin, which you were rubbing. And anyway, so that compressed shooting system, I guess originally invented by three people, he being the main driver of it. And I wrote an article on it for ILFE, for the law enforcement magazine, Firearms Instructor magazine, which is on Natural Tactile on my website. So just go read it for free if you're interested in those origins. And then since his passing early due to cancer, unfortunately, I kind of became the fella to spearhead that system. But it really evolved quite a bit. And so although there's still a way of compressed shooting and that, which is a very cool and interesting technique that works very well for those certain circumstances in a vehicle, or if someone's trying to get your gun or something like that, I still use extended arms, Weaver isosceles kind of concepts, and this fits in with that, another tool for that situation. And then we can certainly talk more about other people and mentors and standing on the shoulders of giants. But just like everyone else kind of says, I collected a bunch of really interesting things and bring them together. But it's not about me. It's about, what those things can be. So.
Great. So you've taken all of those really great concepts and kind of turned it a little bit into your own strategy, which we call 360 CQD. So can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, certainly. So it's not about having to have something named, and I certainly didn't want to call it the Jeff thing, because it's not about me at all. But at the same time, being a Canadian and my craft being, helping educate people with process and content to, repeatedly thrive in deadly force, or at least repeatedly thrive in high stress environments, whether that be the boardroom or the whatever. But especially when it comes to firearms and defensive tactics, those buzz terms. And so 360-degree CQD is slightly more intuitive, right? Because as we said before, words have meaning. So when you heard something like Paul Castle called it the CAR system, center axis relock system, of which one small portion of 360 is that, what the heck does CAR even mean, center axis relock, and that type of thing. And I believe we had those discussions already. I'm a big fan of making things very easy to learn. And one of my, I wouldn't call it a superpower, but one of the things that I do really well is I help pass information. I get you to learn, much faster by making things easier. So for example, we had that talk about a speed reload or an emergency reload. I mean, you're adding to the cognitive load of the person by simply calling it that instead of calling it something more intuitive, a lockback reload or an empty reload or a retention reload. What do you do with that magazine? Well, you keep it, you retain it, for example. So that's just one of the things that we can certainly get into in this, is that the context and the learning process. That's one of the things that I do really well, or that I'm trying to do better all the time, right? Full-time student, part-time instructor. And so, 360-degree CQD is made up of several parts. One of them is the original CAR system, because there's that compressed niche system. Firearms training is a piece of that. Mindset, of course, is a very key thing, not just a buzz term that I throw out there. And recovery and feedback protocols, very large portion of what we do. So when it comes to exercise, or when it comes to practicing the draw stroke, I now focus more on the recovery, or maybe the intensity at the time, and get a lot further with it. So I work out less now and get further than I ever have before, because I focus on recovery, sleep, nutrition, things like that. I train less. So, if you were asking me what would be your prescription now for practicing the draw stroke that we just learned, it would be like 15 minutes long and then walk away, versus the hour that you might be putting in. And there's reasons why that is. And so I stalk some other people like Dr. Andrew Huberman, right, of Stanford, a neuroscience professor, and a super cool and interesting fellow. And I'm not going to profess in any way, shape, or form to understand that material, but I can certainly relay it back. And I know intuitively that it works. Then a man, as I mentioned before, Ken Murray. And so he's got he wrote a book, actually. It's called Training at the Speed of Life, Volume 1. And it's the reality-based training handbook. Really, it's the Bible for reality-based training, or what a lot of people call force-on-force training. Well, I didn't know how much I didn't know about proper training until I met him. And here I was, already an instructor, and former military, that type of thing, been there, done that kind of guy. So I learned from Ken that words have meaning. I learned from Ken things such as, hypnosis, neurolinguistic programming. Whether you believe or don't believe in those things, they're tools. And in turn, you can get people to have real change, whether that's a motor program, or whether that's a learning to deal with fear and anxiety, which is something that happens in a gunfight, or things like that. Anyway, and so kind of portioning that together. As I said, there's certain ways of feedback and learning, recovery protocols, and I'm not just throwing buzz terms out there. I mean, I can certainly give you like the bricks and mortar of it if you like, but that's what I do. And so bringing that together into something, to bring this all the way back around to your question, 360-degree CQD. So 360 degrees, intuitively, there's something to that, right? And so that is my niche. That is my special little thing that sets me apart, I guess, is that I'm really good at compressed shooting. I guess I got a rubber gun here. For once, we're on video, so that's good. And aiming all the way around in a vehicle, for example, that little thing that sets me apart kind of buys me perhaps onto your page for, is this guy crazy, or is there something to that? And as I start talking, really what I'm selling you on is how you can learn better and perform better. Not because you're buying into me, because I'm not going to be there for your fight, and what you can be doing for you, right? And anyway, so the CQD, close quarter defense, because close quarter, a lot of training, you may stick your arms out, as I do, and it works quite well. But if I was very close to you, you wouldn't do that. You'd bring the gun in somehow. You wouldn't just put it where I could grab at it or something like that, or you'd telegraph yourself coming around a corner, for example, or at least I hope you wouldn't. I'm sure you wouldn't. And so
Yeah.
you're going to do, sorry, go
I
ahead.
read in one of your articles that at least 50% of police encounters involving firearms are within 5 feet. So you really have to be able to utilize that compressed shooting to be able to, utilize those skills and make sure that you know how to respond to an attacker who is that close to you.
Yeah, so that would be is in those 2 ILFE articles on the website. But what I was quoting there was the law enforcement officers killed and assaulted, the FBI stats, which are in those articles, because it's all referenced. It's not just my opinion, right? And as you saw there, that so we're talking about law enforcement officers, because unfortunately statistics for civilians aren't kept like that. Law enforcement officers killed by a firearm in the line of duty, a felony, right? A felonious act, not an accident. And yeah, so 50% of them, it was over quite a time period, were within 5 feet, 0 to 5 feet. So arm's reach. And then once again, you're going up to 60, 70, and 80% within, 10 and 20 feet. So that's very close distances. So I guess what I would learn, or what I would want to take away from that is close distances, real aggression, real short time frame, typically, 3 to 5 rounds, 3 to 5 feet, 3 to 5 seconds, those buzz terms that come out of that. So why is that important? Well, the hit rate was atrocious first as well. And so that's for, quote, trained people. And I'm certainly not coming down on them in any way, but I'm saying that perhaps what we think isn't quite exactly the best. Perhaps the way we're training isn't quite exactly the best. And I'd be happy to go into that with, 2 things I try to do. Remember, I say I try to buy people onto my page, right? Owning the grip and owning the trigger. And so a concept that maybe what you think of as trigger control, for example, isn't the best mental model, isn't the best representation of what that is. And what if my simply using words to unpack and for you to then learn something like trigger or something like grip to a much finer degree then allows you to concentrate better, interconnected mental model, right? The schema, the heuristic, the thing in your brain, those synapses firing. So for that 15 minutes, you're concentrating to such a high degree, and it's not effortful necessarily, but you're focused on it, that you're getting more out of it. You're getting further faster, or you're getting further with less versus a half an hour or an hour, and you're not making the connections that matter. And we can get into all that cool neuroscience stuff that I often quote from a guy like Dr. Huberman.
It's so interesting that you talk about getting further with less, because I found that after I got over the initial hurdle of learning how to shoot, I think I just picked up a phone call, sorry. So after I got over that initial hurdle of learning how to shoot, I found that when I went to the range to practice, I was using a lot less ammo because I was doing more with each shot and learning how to read the feedback and learning how to improve after individual shots rather than just dumping a bunch of ammo downrange. So there's so much to that little phrase that you're saying, like getting farther with less. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your techniques.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, you've got me excited now. So that's why I never prepare for these things, is because I'm just feeding off of you. We're having a great conversation, a high quality of conversation, in fact. And so if I may, what you just said there is one of the things that I'm trying to foster. So, instructors are often very well-intentioned, but they often have very well-intentioned failures as well, training failures, because I'm an instructor, firearms instructor at that. And just because I have that firearms instructor on my shirt, even because my agency gave it to me or something like that, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm a good instructor, right? And so I'm standing there giving you feedback, for example, slow squeeze, less, or whatever it is, after every shot, but I'm doing you a massive disservice because I'm not going to be there for your fight. I'm not going to be there, and I need to instill in you the feedback loop. And so, scientifically speaking, it's simply called delayed feedback or tapering feedback. These are processes of adult learning, right? Or of learning, period. It's just as children, we learn so much easier because of neuroplasticity as a child. So by tapering my feedback with you, by creating in you, having it a goal is to have your own feedback mechanism for as you're shooting, then that's the point. And now what if we were to even take that a step further? What if on every shot, it wasn't just the post, it wasn't just the hole that we walked up and saw or something like that? What if you were able to build out in your own mind that a trigger press was more than just one thing, trigger press? What if it was like 5 things or 8 things? Or what if you knew exactly what it was and exactly what it wasn't? If you were able to do that, then while it's happening, you might be able to correct it because you'll now know the difference between a good and a bad one, even at the time it's happening. I'm not saying that's going to necessarily happen in a gunfight, but if you want to build in automaticity, right, the fancy words for saying unconscious competence and all those buzzwords, then, like I did it without thinking about it, then, that's what we're trying to do. Yeah, back over to you. But yeah, exactly. Feedback.
It's interesting because I will say that I have actually worked with a few instructors, because I like to practice, I like to learn. So that way, if something were to ever happen, it's muscle memory kicks in, right? Like you know what to do. And I will say that one of the best things that I've learned from all the instructions that I've got is how to correct my own mistakes. So just like you're saying, Jeff, being able to not just have the instructor tell me, hey, this is what you did wrong, for them to ask me, well, what do you think went wrong? Why was your shot high? Why was your shot low? Like, do you know what you did wrong? And it's that muscle memory and that kind of mechanisms that come into play where it's like, oh, because I shot high, this is what I did. So it's not them always telling you, it's you have to kind of start learning. So then you know how to correct yourself and it kind of goes down the line, right? And I think that's great.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we've heard it from call your shots or something, right? That maybe oh, I know that one went high, low, whatever, that kind of idea. But to me, that's the very entry level conversation. What I really care about and what we should, and I hate that word should, but what really matters is thinking your way through a critical incident. And so I'll say that, I would gladly take away your best tool, jab, cross, hook, uppercut, or something like that, whatever you're best at, I'd gladly take that away forever in order to give you the ability to think your way through a critical incident. And so when we're talking about what really matters, I mean, first of all, you're totally right, is that, I knew that shot did or didn't go in whatever direction. Excellent. You're having that awareness. But now, you're shooting at a moving target. Maybe you're even moving. And so now there's a whole lot more coming into that. So what if I were to tell you, shooting at a moving target, we aim at the past, we shoot at the present, and we hit the future, right? What do you think about that? So if we're aiming at the past, we're shooting at the present, and we're trying to hit the future, and maybe we're even moving, now that brings in a lot more stuff. So once again, we use the same process for helping to develop that. And what I love you to be behind cover when you're doing that, yes. But I don't just want you to, and I'm not coming down on anyone's training, but just because I'm drawing my gun and I'm reloading my gun and I keep stepping and stepping and stepping, I think that simply asking someone to step off the X every single time, all the time, is a well-intentioned training failure. I believe that a higher order conversation needs to happen there, because you're just stepping because. And in real life, are you stepping behind cover? Is there something there? Are you stepping in my way and now I'm going to hit you? Are you stepping for a reason? And if you're not, then we're unintentionally training scars in, or having, less optimal training. So when I talk about getting more with less, or getting further faster, I'm saying that most of the time, and this is the fun conversation, and I do it too, that when I train, I don't realize that I might be putting my foot on the gas or taking 2 steps forward and a step back or a step to the side. And there's these unintended consequences. If surviving a deadly force situation, confrontation is my goal, if competition shooting is my goal, then I'm going to have a slight different flavor on my draw and on my presentation and on my reload and things like that. Yeah, so, those conversations are what really matter to me. And those are the ones that I see we're not having as often. And that's the stuff that I really geek out on and do.
So I know you do a lot of training with law enforcement, obviously. So can you tell me, how does training law enforcement differ from training civilians in your mind?
Oh boy, that's
I like that question. What you got, Jeff?
Well, there are definitely several differences. Typically, it's context driven. So if I've got law enforcement officers coming to my training and they were the ones who were seeking it out, usually they're coming with at least maybe a cup half full kind of, let's see what he's got kind of idea. But sometimes when a department hires me and I get in front of some people, they're just kind of, they're maybe not necessarily thinking that what I have to offer has value. And in every class I do, no matter who it's for, I always say all the pressure's on this side, right? You're here not to impress me in any way, shape, or form. I'm here to impress you, right? And so, you know, the pressure's off for you, the pressure's on for me. At the same time, you know, let's establish, you know, I always say that, whatever, this, after this 5 days or 2 days or whatever, I know you're going to be 100% happy because I'm going to provide you everything that you would like to have happen here. So then we go over to the board and we start writing down, what do you want to have happen? And if I can't provide it, I'll let you know right now, you know, and we'll get on the same page. And so what we really start to do is we really start to unpack. Because if a lot of people, if I simply said I have a shooting course, would go, oh, okay. But then if I said I have a gunfighting course, they'd go, oh, okay. But there's a big difference to me between shooting drills and gunfighting drills. Those are two very separate, although on the surface they might almost look the same, right? And then so, you know, so typically with civilians, you know, you've also got a range of skill sets or a range of abilities, and usually a little more openness. But I find that the firearms, especially firearms for combatives, seems to be this thing that lives outside there somewhere with a lot of civilians, and it's really too bad because it's something that they can master and have for them. Just because you didn't have a life of service in the military or the police doesn't mean that you can't be very good at it, and doesn't mean that in a moment's notice you can't do what is necessary to save yourself, your family, and others, right? And so that's why I have quite a passion for anyone who's willing to learn, have a conversation. I certainly am not right most of the time, for sure. We won't bring my beautiful wife into this, but you know, just the concept being that you know, I just want to have a conversation. And just because I do something a certain way, in no way have I ever told anyone that they have to do it that way too. I ask them why they do what they do, and it could be anything from tying your shoes to the way you reload. Do you reload and then drop the slide with your thumb, or the thumb that just put the mag in, or an overhand grip, or a grip this way, whatever. I believe that there is a better way for when it comes to competition shooting, and a better way when it comes to you know, gunfight, law enforcement, civilian self-defense training. And then how much more you're going to put into it. And you specifically, I got big hands, maybe you don't. I have this much training. I have this type of weapon system. I'm in Canada with gloves on. I don't know, whatever it might be. But the framework that I'm using to do certain things will be the same framework you use, but you might pick a different one, right? If that makes sense. And so anyway, so it's that's why anyone who has a firearms license and or background check is more than welcome on 99% of my courses, because you're going to be the one that saves, you know, me and my daughter on the next mall shooting, you know, because the police just won't happen to be there in time, something like that. Did I answer your question at all?
Yeah, I think that makes a good segue. So you mentioned it's hard for civilians to kind of picture a close quarters like combat situation because it just seems very, you know, abstract in their minds. But it's still something that we have to practice for because, you know, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So I think my next question would be, could you show us the basics of 360 CQD, maybe starting with like CAR and stuff like that?
Absolutely.
I have my rubber gun with me as well.
Oh,
Desi,
good.
did you bring
Okay,
yours?
I've got one as well.
I do not. I'll be using my finger gun.
And of course, I just left because I realized that so before I would show any kind of technique, once again, we're going to get on the same page, right? So if this was a course, you know, I'm going to provide you everything that you wanted to have happen. You're going to be 100% happy because we're going to figure out ahead of time what that is. You know, and so every single thing starts with mindset. And so I believe it was Colonel Grossman, so the On Combat, On Killing author, right? Retired Colonel Grossman. So he was talking about interpersonal human aggression is the last human phobia. So that up in someone's face or someone up in your face, or that's someone who's trying to harm you or shoot at you or punch you or whatever it is, or denying your humanity so much, you know, it's a very hard thing to deal with. And I'm certainly not saying that I'm a professional at dealing with it, although I'm a professional at dealing with it. And you know, that's what I teach as well, is to recover from it so I can do it again, you know. And so violence, in my opinion, is a toxic, corrosive, sticky, black, horrible thing that changes you to the cell in your tailbone forever. And you know, it's a horrible, corrosive environment that we're not meant to be in, although we have to be in it. Now, whether it was, you know, saber-toothed tiger back in the day or something like that, you know, there are certain things we must understand in order to do that. And so I like to talk about reframing, or, you know, there's that idea of putting a new frame around whatever picture you're looking at, right? And so I'll say, you know, I'm a pacifist, which is true. I'm not lying. You know, I've been training for many, many years in violence, right? So in the martial arts, in firearms, in use of force, you know, those types of ideas, although I am a pacifist. And the reason is that I am choosing to be a pacifist instead of condemning myself to being one. And so I don't want to enact violence against people, but if something happened and I walked in and there was my poor child, you know, and someone doing something to them, I have the ability to choose not to be. I have the ability to then actually do something that means something instead of just putting myself in harm's way in a futile effort. You know, I'm quite good at those things. And so I would just kind of offer anyone, civilian, law enforcement, military, whatever that being, is to start to frame, you know, how it is that you're going to go about thinking about that corrosive, gross, interpersonal human aggression thing. And so one book that I always ask people to read would be this one, Deep Survival, by a fellow named Gonzalez. I think it's just a really great book. Who lives, who dies, and why? I don't think there's any military or police stories in there. It's just about quote unquote people. But, you know, why did a plane crash and all the adults died and a 17-year-old girl walked out of the jungle alive? You know, what was going on with that? And there's some really cool stuff in there. I think we had a conversation about it before. There are 3 types of people that will typically get people killed. Did we talk about that before?
No, we haven't.
Right. So the unlucky, the inexperienced, and the highly experienced. Right. Those are the three kinds of people. So I simply offer to you the idea, and I think it came from Gonzalez, the river rafting guide, right? So the whitewater rafting guide. Been on this river for 10 years. All right, jump in the boat, let's go. Well, that highly experienced person knows that river is different every single day. In fact, could change throughout the day. And they got to go look at it and see what it's like, not just think they know, and then all of a sudden get someone killed, right? Add any high risk endeavor into that. Law enforcement training, parachuting, something like that. So Gonzalez, I think it was Gonzalez that said, in any high risk endeavor, there will be deaths. And I didn't like that because training cops is a high risk endeavor. And so Ken Murray, was that other book I mentioned, Training at the Speed of Life, Volume 1. I don't know if that's even blurry or not, sorry about that. And then he's got a workbook and stuff because he's got a great course of which I help him teach. So I'm really happy about that as well. So he was saying that, you know, I don't like that because teaching police officers, I can't remember what the number is off the top of my head, but, you know, it's like 4 or 6 a year. Cops die in training, in scenario training every year. We're killing cops. And that's horrible. Why is that even happening? And so, you know, in any high risk endeavor, there will be deaths, but it doesn't have to happen in my training. So what's the caveat there? Well, because I will approach it in this manner where, although I'm an expert, which I'm never going to say that about myself, but, you know, I do have safety protocol checks and balances, things like that, that are in line and trying to buffer that, right? Not just we can't get a good cheek weld with these weird masks on for our paint training, so we won't take headshots. Well, the next thing you know, a paint round enters someone's nose, goes up into their brain, and there's your training and the rest of it done, not to mention that person in a lawsuit, which has happened, right? So there's, I'm trying not to be on a tangent here. I'm getting there. One last book. And I just read this one, Deadly Force Encounters, 2nd edition. And so this one is a book that my law enforcement and my civilian friends, I asked, well, all 3 of these for them to read. And this one had some really great chapters in it: legal defense, mindset, what's it like to be in an interpersonal human aggression kind of situation and incident. Because of course, the most powerful thing we can train is our mind. And if you're going to go to someone's training because they were, you know, a been there, done that, you know, tier 1 special forces person, that's great. But you have to come away from that with knowledge, skills, and ability for you, because that person won't be there for your fight either. And maybe the context isn't even as relevant because you're carrying a 7-shot whatever concealed with your kids, and they're carrying, you know, an M4 and a whatever kind of on a team. Or the point being is that we really have to break down and understand that just because that person does that technique and tactic might not be good for me. What reload, back to that, is best for you and why? For the amount of training you have, for the type of physique and physiology that you have. And if you can't answer those questions, or you're not asking those questions, which most of the time we're not, then I believe you're missing the boat because you're at the wrong dock. Right, you're going for that cool thing out there and hoping that it's gonna give you that feeling of confidence and competence. But when push comes to shove, are you actually going to be able to think your way through a critical incident? Are you going to poke them in the eye and get back to where it's safe to deploy your weapon system in a proper manner, focus on your breathing, and call for support? You know, something like that. Way more than how quickly you can do a El Presidente, right? If that makes sense. So now I've pontificated yet again, and I haven't answered your question, but
We're getting there.
You want to just ask it? I thought that was a good setting of the framework for answering the question with a technique. So that's the process stuff that I'm talking about, and I can certainly get to the content. I'll let you say something while I drink.
Well, the thing I'm going to say is actually a question for you. Is one of those books, does that include the 7 survivals that we discussed in one of our last conversations?
Yep. So the framework around which that I'm hoping people start evaluating training and their incidents and gunfighting, or, you know, all those things. Ken Murray's Training at the Speed of Life book. I believe it's in that book, but it's for sure on his website, and that's just rbta.net, Reality Based Training Association, rbta.net. Just type in 7 survivals into Google. And the idea with the 7 survivals is, once again, you have to survive every incident that you're ever in 7 different ways. So physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, financial, legal, ethical, right? If you don't survive it in all 7 of those, you don't survive. So just because I made it through, but now I'm a divorcee alcoholic, that's not surviving. Or just because I made it through, but I'm fired or I'm in jail, that's not surviving either. And so it's just a framework that is the center cog. From that, we expand out. This is actually the first lesson I would ever do. It was that mind, muzzle, finger concepts, you know, how do you hold a firearm? I think we had those discussions already. If not, we can have them. But I apologize to do a lot of these things, you know, blur together because I'm just looking at myself on the screen. And you know, so how do you hold a gun? You know, Desiree, I know we just met today, so I'll say that. So Desiree, if I were to ask you, how do you hold a gun? What would you say?
I hold it like this.
Okay, and so
And I would go like this.
Absolutely. And so I would like to offer with purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I hold a gun with purpose. And so quite often you'll see someone doing even a movement. So one of the first things we do is we walk out on a firearms class and we just have a shoot. You know, 3 rounds from the holster, 2 rounds, whatever it is. And all I'm doing is I'm just watching you, safety, that type of idea. But how are you working with the tool itself? How do you hold it? Do you hold it with purpose? And if you're holding it with purpose, that would be an, quote, final firing grip. And what does that mean? And so we just start to shape more about, we start to shape or bring attention to, is what I should say, is that how many times have you gotten your gun out of the safe in Canada, at least, or have you had an administrative function with a gun when you were holding it in a manner that wasn't with a final firing grip, when you were holding it in a way that actually was putting repetitions into your subconscious of a not optimal way of even holding onto the thing, you're once again going forward but going backward. And so by simply bringing your attention to these times when, I don't have a magazine, but you can imagine even just, I have a very specific way as to how to hold a magazine and how to think about it. And it's not just with your finger towards the bullet tip. In fact, that's the most commonly misunderstood thing there is, although I do that, but for a different reason. It's actually into the base of your hand. And why? So just driving that so that everything is for a reason, which you understand and reinforce constantly. Therefore, I'm getting more good repetitions and less negative repetitions, which you didn't even know you were doing. Is that make sense? Yeah.
No, 100% makes sense. Yeah, you purposely are holding your gun is what you're looking at.
Absolutely. So yeah, so if you hold a gun with purpose, and that is a handgun in this case with a final firing grip, which is defined by Desiree as high up in the tang as possible, and then where around goes to the size of your hand for the size of the gun versus where your finger is going to be going. And then if I were to say there's this process called owning the trigger, imagine if I could just take an hour with you, well, less than that, I suppose, and you could come away with a deeper, richer understanding of your trigger press. I mean, wouldn't that be worth it? We do that in the class. I'd be happy to do it with you right now. It's not like some hidden thing. I offer it to everyone. But the point being is that you come away with a richer, deeper knowledge and understanding versus that guy's really good at shooting and I'm going to go train from him and hope that is what I'm going to perform as. Does that make sense?
100%.
You know, it's been there, done that, and let me tell you that you know, I'm a policeman, but I wasn't a special forces guy. And if I was a special forces guy, I wasn't the guy on that raid or that thing. Everyone can have doubt. Everyone can have anxiety, can have fear, and what do we do with that, and how do we go forward properly? And those are the specific things that I geek out on.
That's cool.
Okay, Wendy, so are we going to start pointing guns around, or what are we going to do here? Okay.
Says he's got finger guns, but
I have a finger. I'm sorry, I don't have a toy gun around my house. I have Nerf guns, but not a toy rubber gun like you guys. So.
All right. So typically a weaver or an isosceles, right, kind of understanding as a grip, right, or as a stance, right? But what we'll draw attention to, and just make sure you can see this. If you can't, let me know, because otherwise the point will be lost. Thumbs forward, right? My thumbs are forward, typically speaking, unless I don't know when they would ever be anything else. But forward is the idea. Whether they're up or whether they're pointed forward, it's up to you. But the point being is they're forward. Now, if you were going to compress that gun back, it becomes actually very, very weak. So if you were just going to center line it, kind of like the old MP5 center line position or something like that, then, and I were to then just simply push or pull on it, it's very weak in your hand. Do you feel that and see that? So that's one of the ways I would take it away from you, for example, or that's one of the ways that you would inadvertently make it weak and easy for me to take from you. But if you were to then take your, never changing your gripping hand, your firing hand, your master hand, whatever word you're putting on that, your weapon side hand in this case, but simply changing the other one. So if I were to then take that hand and place it so that the wrist is straight and I'm into that hand, realistically, I could cut these fingers right off because they're not doing anything. But I just let them fall naturally. So I've put the gun into my hand here, and I've got a straight wrist. So bent wrist, see how it's bent?
Yeah.
Straight wrist, meaning now the thumbs can just have a contact point. All I'm worried about is I don't want the thumbs pressed up against the gun because they'll impede the feed, fire, extract, eject of the gun, right? So I want to make sure that the gun's cycling and functioning on its own normally. So by simply doing that, we've got a lot of stability and structure there. So I've got a lot of stability with a quote pulling and a quote pushing. And what I would do if you were here right now is I'd say, hey, you know, feel my traps or feel my lats for a second. You know, that what I'm doing is I'm engaging them and I'm not just squeezing the crap out of this gun or anything like that. The quote isometric tension, which is my muscles are actively working but not getting shorter or longer, right? Isometric tension is happening, but only on shot discharge. So if I was punching something, you know, at the moment that I got to it is when the rest of my body down to, you know, torquing and being strong all the way into the ground would happen. It would be actually quite relaxed until that moment, if that makes sense. So I'm quite relaxed until I go to shoot. And then when I go to shoot, I think about taking these two fingers, not the pinky, and simply pressing them into the strength and stability of that palm. And then that allows me, because I'm not over gripping with that pinky, it allows me to work my trigger finger very easily. But if I was gripping the crap out of it with my pinky, notice how it puts so much tension into your trigger finger as well. So by not being with the pinky, and then there's some other talks about that and how, you know, typically an over gripping with that little finger is going to start to throw some shots low left for a right-handed shooter, vice versa. So it's just a little parlor trick to bring someone's attention to it in a not optimal manner of pressing the trigger that they're doing without knowing, right? I just need you to move the trigger without moving the gun. And we think we're doing that, but especially if trigger is one thing, well, then how do you know when you're not doing it right? If your trigger became 5 or 6 things that you could be aware of, but then we're just simply enacting without consciously thinking of it, you would have that ingrained, right? So here we are. So straight wrist on the supporting hand, that's it. And then if you wanted to, you could aim, so gun in the right hand with your left eye. If I were then in the driver's seat, reaching all the way back and around, you can see I'm still squared forward. Maybe you can't, but I am. I'm still squared forward. And I would simply mimic that, and I'll show you how to change hands in a second, all the way back around the other direction. So now I put the gun in my other hand, and I've mimicked that process, whether it be in a high or a low kind of ready idea, and I can pivot very easily while still seat belted in and cover over 360 degrees of aim fire. That's the very brief version of that. And then changing hands, I could certainly teach you that right now very easily. But maybe there's some questions first. So, you know, do you have to aim with that other eye? Absolutely not. You could certainly just aim like this. In fact, it's made popular in John Wick. There was still, you could see that brought back. So there was still a bent wrist, brought faced forward, and he was aiming with, you can see with my right eye. But if he switched that and fixed that, it would be a little more optimal. You know, and more towards the elimination of dual sight picture. And do you know what I mean by that, or have we talked about that already? That's in those articles as well. But simply,
yeah, I saw that. So instead of seeing two pictures of what your vision is, now you're just focused with one. Because you've tilted your head so that there's only one sight picture. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. So just to cover that, so, you know, one of the first things we do is, you know, the typical, yeah, where's the camera? There we are. So cover my nose, you know, with a small hole between your hands extended. You can see that I'm a right eye dominant fella, because if I close my right eye, you can't see my eye anymore. If I close my left eye, you can, kind of idea, right? So, okay, so that's your dominant eye. What does that actually mean? You know, we've been taught that dominant eye has all these concepts on it, but does it really? Does it really mean that? Well, it does if you're forward. And so that's why as a right-handed shooter, holster on my right side, right eye dominant, when I'm coming up from stage 1 to 2 to 3, I will typically start it, I'll just aim at the camera so you see, up under that dominant quote unquote eye, riding forward on sights, on picking up slack on trigger, etc. And if I were left eye dominant, I would be doing it in that scenario to my master or dominant eye that way. Well, so one of the things that we talk about, remember, going back to what you said, Wendy, is that, you know, like 50% of law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty by a gun were within 5 feet. You know, so let's just simply do this. So if you don't mind, ladies, take your trigger finger, and when I ask you to, cover my nose with it, right? I know I'm on screen, but just do that. So just bonk, extend your arm, both eyes open, and cover my nose. Everybody can do this at home. Now, if I ask you to look at your fingertip, how many noses do you see? You'll see 2 noses and 1 fingertip. If I ask you to look at my nose, you'll see 1 nose and 2 of your fingertips. That's because we have two eyes going forward, converging on one point in time and space at one time. All of this is in those articles for anybody who's just lost in following. It's all written out and all the rest of it. But the point being is that you have anything you perceive when I'm looking at this pen tip, anything I see before it or after it, I will see two of. And that's dual sight picture in this case. Happy with that so far?
Yeah.
So a lot of people will close an eye, or they'll train a lot, right? Which, I mean, I shoot with both eyes open, and it's a great thing to do. And there's a certain, put Scotch tape over your glasses and make it smaller and smaller and smaller as we go along. And that kind of idea is a quick way of getting through that. But the point being is that, which front sight are you using to aim, and which bad guy are you aiming at, especially within 10 feet or something like that, in a holy crap, not prepared for it kind of situation. So if I have a little more time, I will just simply press out to, time and distance. I'm not going to put my gun into where it can get taken either. I mean, I'm not going to put my gun and telegraph it into the room or something like that idea as well. But so time more than distance, I guess, will kind of be a flux as to when I use the technique or not. But anyway, so point being is that if I simply turn my head slightly, so all I'm doing is I cannot see the front sight of my gun with my right eye because the bridge of my nose is in the way. So how far do you turn your head? Very little. So I can see the front sight right now with my right eye. I close what I would like to use as my firing eye, my left eye, and I simply turn my head, right to there, and that's it. And now, as you can see, I'm using my foveal, my center of the eye vision, which is the most acute vision. I want to keep doing that instead of some kind of like right up the corner of my head like that. Not as optimal, right? And so the bridge of my nose is in the way. Therefore, whatever front sight I see when I'm spinning around because shotgun blasts are coming into my vehicle, I can just engage, switch and engage, right? Switch, work the gun, and then get back into business kind of idea very quickly, a lot faster than I ever could. In fact, I can't even aim back that direction. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer as to why it would be better there, I think, anyway. I've yet to see why it wouldn't be. Why wouldn't you want to know that if you're inside of a vehicle or in an airline marshal or something like that, a pilot, right? So what questions have you got? I hope I'm explaining that well on Zoom.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. That makes really good sense. Wendy?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we touch on how to switch hands before we...
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for reminding me. So there are many ways of changing the gun in your hands. There's one way that we like for certain reasons as to be the more optimal. Remember, nothing's wrong. We're just kind of looking at it as being more optimal or less optimal. So if, you can kind of see that. Okay, so you can see my thumb on this side. The way that I would like to do it, and I'll just show that one first, and then I'll describe it's only three very easy steps, goes like this. I'll do high ready because we'll pretend I'm seated in a vehicle, right, instead of standing at my desk. That's it. Now, if it was low ready, it would be here or here if that were a safe place for the muzzle. And so simply put, all I'm doing is I'm letting the gun, the way that we normally teach it is from a position that most people already know already. So if my arms are extended in weaver or isosceles, here's the deal. The first thing I would like you to do is bend your elbows in. If you bend your elbows in and you're not at full extension, changing hands, right? I mean, quite obviously, you've got more room to play with here. It's safer for you, right? Happy with that? After bending my elbows, I'm going to just rock the gun forward slightly, exposing the tang here. So you remember, if the gun were in a holster, the first part I would then look to go to would be to get that final firing grip high up in the tang as possible. So I'm just treating my hand like a holster, rocking it forward. My hands are so big that I can just do that quite easily. So some people will just let it rock forward like that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. You expose the tang. So rock is number one. Then I bring in my other hand, getting that instant high up in the tang grip. I rotate it so that I'm letting gravity place. it into that other hand, and it's there and it's done. Rock, grip, place. I like the word place versus drop or let go or release, right? All these words are for a reason. Rock, grip, place. High ready, rock, grip, place. Rock, grip, place. And there it is. Low ready, the same. Rock, I'll just step back, rock, grip, place. So maybe I'm here, something happens, I look and see, I need to get my gun orientated in that direction. I will bring it down. I mean, as you can see, I couldn't help but move because why wouldn't I, right? And really, if you look at that, look at where the gun is. And where does the gun end up being? Well, it barely moves. Just like when I draw the gun, I'm drawing the gun and the gun is barely moving. I'm moving around the gun, which is why I draw and shoot faster, because I'm moving to it and it's moving to me as well. You know, I still do this one as well, right? But when I have more time. So rock, grip, place.
It's so smooth when you do it, and you can just transition back and forth. It's very, very cool to watch.
Well, thank you. I guess it comes from practice, but I just wish Paul Castle would have said rock, grip, place instead of what's wrong with you? You can't do it. It's just like that. That's how he used to teach it. And it was frustrating. Like but so now there is one, and I'm not coming down on it, except I would like to say that some people move the thumb and then acquire the grab. Move the thumb over and then acquire the grab. I feel that that is not as safe, therefore not as optimal, and I'll express why. Because the people I teach are not all big hairy men with great big hands that can simply move their hand back and forth very easily like that. You know, my wife, not my size, so when she moves her hands over, she has a hard time getting that back over again on a full-sized handgun like this. Yeah. So by rocking forward, I can simply rock it back very quickly and easily, not to mention I had that other hand there anyway. By moving it, and then what were to happen now? What if I bumped into the steering wheel, right? I have no positive control as I do here. Does that make sense? And there's just two quick examples as to why it works very well if I were right side of the barricade, left side of the barricade, but in an environment we're talking about, moving and orientating to a moving target, maybe multiple targets with a reload and a stoppage drill, well, now it's just not setting you up for positive control as well. Happy with that?
Yeah, I can see a huge difference just for me personally.
Okay, right on. Well, then I'm glad we still agree. If you would have come up with a reason why it wasn't as good, I would have stole it, given you credit for it, and started teaching it from this point on.
All right, that's awesome. Great. So you have some really good training courses available. One of them is on your website, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to just give us the 30-second overview of what we can get from that course to share with our readers, listeners.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. So yeah, of course I do live classes, and looking to come out to California as soon as we can. COVID restrictions are unfortunately what they are. So very, very much looking forward to coming out and training with you ladies live, and everyone else. There's quite a few departments and stuff there that I'm trying to book with. But on the online training, there's a very old course. It's the old e-learning course that I did for the basic fundamentals. It would have been like 12 years ago of the old original center axis relock system. And so that is online. It's still something that if someone wants to come and learn this close-in system from me, that we say to take, because it pre-frames it. We have a good discussions and things like that, because I'm really just about community. So, you know, if you took the course, we just have a quick Zoom or a phone call or something like that, and then you can practice properly and of course get way further, way faster. And so given COVID at the beginning of this year, I still did a very large course in Raleigh live, you know, for 3 and 5 days. There was 2 courses in one. But at the beginning of this year, because of COVID, we ended up doing some Zoom classes. And so I didn't realize that we can actually get a lot done in regards to that. So we cut the whole first day out of that course in Raleigh by simply doing it ahead of time on Zoom. And everybody got way further in the live training. So that sold me and this isn't just some marketing thing, that actually sold me on doing it online. Because I mean, I'm very much trying to build a relationship with you and how you're thinking about it, not just doing it and things like that. But I was able to get pretty far with, and personally giving you, like, stand up and show me what you're talking about, draw the gun. Oh, you see here, that kind of feedback. I was really, really surprised at that. So, or I'm currently putting those together, but I want to do a few more of them. So I've done 4 of them so far. They're anywhere from like 4 sessions to 6 sessions of an hour and a half long. So if you're interested in that stuff, shoot me an email, just simply jeff@naturaltactical.com. And all I'm doing is I'm filling them with people, teaching them. And then now that I get feedback from you, because of course I give you a heck of a discount because you're going to give me feedback on the course. And then that way I'm going to produce that, and then it'll be, just for sale and use and that type of thing for people who are coming to a course, or I guess if they didn't want to come to a course, but I'm sure you would. So then those courses are based around either I want to learn this compressed shooting thing, or I just want to, and I call it from the ground up. It's like how I would have wanted to think about and draw and holster and mag change and just all those things from the ground up. If I could go back in time and not have to redo and redo and redo all the training I've had. And then another one is the kind of the instructor thing. So, or just an optimizing my ability to learn. So one of the things I would love to give every recruit or every person, is the ability to either take shitty instruction and figure it out, get your own feedback mechanisms, and or to actually get good instruction, or to be able to teach properly. And that's what's made my marriage happier, and I'm a better interviewer, with bad guys and just all kinds of stuff, because it's all the same, right? Yeah.
Cool. And then, so lots of learning opportunities available on your website, and we're hoping sometime in 2021 that you'll be joining us here in San Diego and Southern California for lots of other live fire training opportunities, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And in all honesty, I'm not sure, hopefully that the listeners, if there's, I'm not sure all 6 of them or whatever, only because not you, I mean me, if there's 6 people who are still listening after I've been gabbing away. But I mean, I would be very happy in coming back on and answering questions, or specifically teaching a thing or whatever, doing that owning your draw or something like that. I geek out on that stuff, and it's just building community and people. So, if that were the case, we'd love to do that. And I know that, we had Melissa and yourself, Wendy, we talked about even just being involved in some of those sessions, like on Zoom, teaching prior to my coming out. So we'll definitely do that as well.
Well, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your knowledge and building that community. It's so important for us to share all this knowledge and improve the entire Second Amendment organization, industry, and the whole, worldwide community. Self-defense is more important than ever, and I love all of your content and your processes. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
The time blew by for me. So if we're done, we're done. I look forward to it again. And it was a pleasure meeting you and talking to you again, Wendy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching our Magnum show, where we dig into gun owners topics a little more in depth. You can watch us live every Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. California time, right here on our YouTube channel, or if you're in the San Diego area, you can listen to us on 1170 a.m. We're also available on your favorite podcast platform for free. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can help restore and protect the Second Amendment, not just in California, but across the country.